Heya folks, how we going? Normally I'm a little bit reluctant to pick up tabletop role-playing games that are based on a pre-existing franchise. Part of my concern is wondering if I have to consume a bunch of external media, like movies, books, TV shows, instead of reading a game manual where the lore of the world is contained to the book. Another one of my concerns is I worry that my players will think that we're going to be role-playing the story of the franchise. While this is definitely not the case with many of the tabletop role-playing games that are out there, I just want to admit my bias. But today I am actually talking about a tabletop role-playing game based on a pre-existing franchise. This is Sentinel Comics, the role-playing game. To play this game, you don't need to know anything about the Sentinels franchise, which is a big relief. Some of you might be a bit curious about what even is Sentinels. I will give a really brief rundown. Back in 2011, at a con, Sentinels of the Universe debuted as a card game. Now, I only discovered the game in 2017. I was very late to the party. By then, there were a fair few expansions out, and there's even a tactical game, if that piques your interest. To be brief, Sentinels is a love letter to comic books. The characters of this universe humorously play on the tropes you find in comic book characters. For the role-playing game, they've moved the timeline along and given you a fresh start. The role-playing game takes place after the final expansion of the card game, where a massive bad guy came from space and tried to end the world, so even the good guys and the bad guys had to team up together to stop him. If that sounds familiar, they haven't stolen from any movies you know about. This has been a comic book trope almost as old as the medium itself. In short, the role-playing game takes place afterwards and is about a fresh new generation of superheroes ready to save the day. If you are a fan of the original card game, there are bits of lore and character stats that you can find in the game, or you can build your own universe from scratch. This is a dice pooling game, which does generally mean it's a crunchier style game. Generally for this game, you'll take one of 6 actions: attack, overcome, boost, hinder, defend, or recover. These actions are performed using a range of dice, generally from a d4 to a d12. To perform an action, you pick from your powers, engage a quality or skill your character has, and then roll a die for your status. These 3 die then become your min, your median, and your max die. These can then be arranged as you please to perform what you want to do. Status does require a bit of an explanation. It's based around this system they've put in place called the gyro, which stands for green, yellow, red, or out. The game master, in this one called the game moderator, keeps track of this as the action progresses, and it generally refers to a rising tension or rising action in an action or combat scene. The scene progresses through these stages after the environment has a turn. Yes, the environment has a turn. Generally, this refers to complications that might arise from where the action is taking place. If it is taking place in a crowded city, there might be bystanders or cars in the way. If you're on a lava plane, there might be lava. Something else that I also find really interesting is there's no strict turn order in this game. During combat or action scenes, players will actually hand off the scene to another player character. It's recommended you warn them ahead of time at the start of your turn to let them know that they're next, but I think this is a really interesting and organic way to play. There's also a thing called twists and hero points. Twists tend to refer to outcomes of players' actions that change the story in some interesting or dynamic way. Hero points occur when a player looks to their hero's principles to overcome an obstacle. In these scenarios, everyone gets a point, and at the end of the session, they can actually be turned into ongoing bonuses. Building a character for this game is pretty involved, but you do get a lot of cool options with a lot of tables to choose from. This is also a game where I could make a separate video about character creation alone. Maybe maybe that'll be on the cards one day. Another cute little mechanical idea is that every single session is called an issue. When you've had 6 sessions, or 6 issues, they become compiled into what is called a collection. Once you've reached a collection, that is when you get an opportunity to modify or change your character. You can change their appearance, modify their abilities a little bit, that sort of thing. I will say there isn't any leveling to this game. Your characters will tend to have the same amount of power or number of skills. I have to say this is a dense book. There are a lot of tables for how to run this game, and if you wanted to, you could run it entirely off the table. I will say the tables make it really easy to peruse various things, and if something catches your eye, you can then find a more detailed description of it further into the book. You also get 2 pre-written adventures to play through. There's also some heroes and villains for you to lean on and use in-game. Something I haven't yet mentioned is the art. Sentinels as a franchise has always had beautiful art with rich comic book colors. Not only are these illustrations colourful and evocative, they actually use comic book panels for their examples of play. That's a little detail that I think is a bit different and really interesting. Now, I paid about $100 for this book, which does seem like a lot, but it is a very thick book. I know that there are already a few superhero games out there on the market. What makes this one different for me is that it is directly referencing and tying itself into comic books specifically. There's also a loving parody of the superhero genre happening in here, which I think some tabletop role-playing games leave out. I don't think this is a game for everyone. I think if you have someone in your group who doesn't like superheroes as a genre, this isn't going to convert them. There's also a fair amount of crunch that leans heavily into the combat and action scenes. There's definitely benefits to good roleplay, but it's not the emphasis of this book. What I think is good about this as a superhero tabletop role-playing game compared to other ones on the market is that at the moment it is contained to one book to run everything. I know that there are other systems out there that tend to have multiple installments to run the game, whereas this one, while it is a thick book, it is just the one book. Well, those were my thoughts on Sentinel Comics, the role-playing game. I'd like to know, what do you think of superhero-based games? Do you love them? Do you not care about them? Is there something really specific that you would like to build in them? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, I encourage you to do the thumbs up and subscribe and maybe share. It all just encourages me to keep going. I really appreciate you guys all tuning in, and I hope to see you next time at the gaming table. Bye!